to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people, and they shall be... Good morning, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're in the book of Nahum chapter 2. Sorry, I took my brain pills, right? Okay. Alright. We left off at verse 8. That's what we're on today. We're talking about the fall of Nineveh. And let's continue verse 8. But Nineveh is of old like a pool of water, yet they shall flee away. Stand, stand, shall they cry, but none shall look back. In the previous verse, it was talking about them being led away captive. The whole city and her maids tabering and the wailing to go about there. All right. When it says, but Nineveh is of old like a pool of water, I think that probably means that, a pool of water obviously is a symbol of refreshment, refuge, I think of all the promises that are tied up with pools of water or streams of water. Streams of water are even better. But in Jerusalem, they had a pool. It was important. The pool of Siloam. There were other pools. But basically, and pool, I just realized that to me, I'm thinking of pool in terms of water being pooled as opposed to a swimming pool, which obviously is not what they're talking about. But it's like a collection of water in a city, a place where waters gather together into a pool. And for drinking. And I suppose for other uses, right? Because cities need water. And they often have water fed in through channels and aqueducts into pools where it's collected and it's there for the people's use. And, think about when Jesus said to the woman at the well, the time is coming and now is where, you will neither... Well, actually, the part I wanted to... He did say that, but what I wanted to quote was him saying that, if you knew who you were talking to, you would ask of him, and he would give you living water, and it would be in you a well of life springing up in a well of water in you, springing up in everlasting life. And so, obviously, water being the essential ingredient of life, even science recognizes that. I always think it's funny because they talk about it like it's a major discovery. Sometimes, well, I feel like that. I feel like I get this impression where there's water. Yeah, it's like, well, certainly all life that we know of, right? Needs a bit of dampness. We haven't come up with a dry life yet. Meaning discovered, come up with, not like invented. That we haven't not yet observed in a dry life. Anyways, so... like a pool of water, meaning a life-giving, sustaining thing. The city has been around for a long time. Yet they will flee away. They will run from it. From something that's been precious and life-giving and sustaining, they will run. They stand, they shall cry, stand, fight, defend your city. But nobody's going to look back. That's what you call a rout. When when the soldiers are not just retreating, because retreating is like a backwards walk.
You're fighting and moving back. Fall back to a different position. And giving way. But you're not supposed to just turn tail and run. Though eventually, if it's bad enough, that's what people do. And you can't control it. It's just what happens. And so Nineveh, though Nineveh is a desirable city. And of course, Nineveh, I don't ever want to lose sight of just, it's easy to just go through this and be like, this is what the words mean. But symbolically speaking, in terms of Antichrist and his kingdom, in the end, because the thing is, Satan, like when he tempted the Lord, he said, things like, if you fall down and worship me, I'll give you all these kingdoms. And he certainly gives things and sustains people with things. Satan gives gifts, but they're short-lived. And also a pool of water is like that, isn't it? Because pools dry up. It's not and wells dry up too, but it's not a spring. And, a perennial spring that never ceases to give water. And those can technically dry up, but they usually don't, not in like a month. You know what I mean? Meaning like if a pool is not resupplied, it'll dry up very quickly. Like I have a little pool out back in my property I dug years ago, and it fills up with rainwater, and toads breed in it. But if it doesn't rain for a couple weeks, it's dry. It just dries right down to the ground. And so pools are, it's not like this thing, and Satan's like that. He provides sustenance, provides a sense of stability, a sense of kingdom, a sense of place, a sense of, a rule. But he is not the giver of life and cannot bring life or sustain it for long. And the kingdom of the enemy is like that. It is short-lived. It is unsustainable. It does not truly give life. And though it is something that is sustaining and giving them life, when it begins to fall, all men will turn their back on it and run away. Just like when when Babylon falls, they all mourn and say, alas, alas, that great city. And they cast dust on their heads and they weep and mourn. But they don't try to help at that point. Once the city's fallen, everyone turns their backs on it. Everyone swears I didn't have anything to do with that. It's like when, I'm just going to draw an inconvenient analogy. Alright, take ye the spoil of silver, take the spoil of gold, for there is none end of the store, and glory out of all the pleasant furniture. Furniture is probably an unpleasant or an unfortunate translation, because to my mind it sounds weird. Pleasant furniture. Furniture is something, I guess, in my life, furniture is something like I have in abundance. When I think of like, I get a lot of couches, sofas, chairs, but this is not just that, but it's the the beautiful tables, ornately engraved. I forget that in the old days, a furniture was a rock, and if you're lucky, maybe a table. There was not a lot of furnishings for people's houses because they were barely eking out an existence. Beyond what they could make for themselves or obtain by trade, there wasn't a lot of like fancy craftsman-made furniture in people's houses. But Nineveh had conquered, the Assyrians had conquered many peoples and taken the spoil of many peoples, the wealth of many peoples, all the good stuff they took for themselves. So in her will be found all kinds of pleasant things, furnitures, silver and gold. And that is also, answers to like the fall of Babylon in the book of Revelation, she also has in her all this merchandise. And it starts off the merchandise of gold and of silver and of precious stones. She has all kinds of, linen, fur, ointments, everything from consumables to non-consumables. It's found in her. Beasts and sheep and souls of men. So also Nineveh is just filled, jam-packed with the goods she has gotten. She is empty and void and waste, and the heart melteth, and the knees smite together, and much pain is in all loins, and the faces of them all gather blackness. Whenever I come across that phrase in the King James Bible, I find that just lovely. I love that. Knees smite together. That's such a quaint way to say, knocking knees. I mean, it's funny because we still have that that picture of what it means to be afraid of someone's knees knocking together. I don't. Maybe I've never been that afraid, but I've never had that happen. I've felt shivering, and the pain. I felt pain from fear, like all the strength going out of me, like the heart melting, the strength, all the will being drained away. I've been in fearful situations where I felt like I couldn't stand up in the midst of like when I was told your son may die, that kind of stuff. And but I've never been someplace frightened, and I was at a place where people were threatening to pull guns, which was scary. I was pretty young, 17 at the time, or 18, I forget, 18 I think. Let's get the pistol, and people running around, and scary. But I felt a little bit like, I felt like things were slowed down but then afterwards it seemed like they happened all in a single moment. I don't know. But like, the idea is, I don't know if anyone's knees have ever exactly hit each other, like the cliche of like knees knocking back and forth. But I guess the idea is that when the strength goes out of your legs, your knees do buckle and go in. Your knees can go in if you lose your strength. I don't know if it means like perpetually knocking back and forth. I don't know. Maybe that happens. I'm just saying, I don't know if that idiom is just a pure idiom that just crosses time and language, or if it's something that actually happens to people. I've never experienced it. I've never observed it. Just like the heart melt. Their heart melts. Their knees are knocking together. They feel pain in their loins. All these sort of psychosomatic afflictions. Faces gathering blackness. And that's, again, that's another, you understand how to interpret these things. It's the expression on their face. A black expression. That's a black expression. Now, I just realized in today's world, people might think that has some sort of racial connotation. It doesn't. It's nothing to do with anyone's race. It's like, they didn't call, back then they wouldn't call anybody black. They'd say, oh, a Nubian, an Ethiopian, where are you from? That kind of thing. There was no like, they describe people's skin otherwise. Besides, black people aren't black. They're just dark brown at the most, And so, we're all just basically shades of brown anyways, from very light brown to very dark brown. There's no such thing as a white person either. Even, I don't know, maybe a whatchamacallit, what are those things called? Albino. And what is that thing called? Albinoism. Sorry, you're on a thing if you're an albino. Much respect to the albinos, to the true white people. So, anyways, the idea of your face gathering blackness means the idea of black and this is why a lot of people don't like to be called. I mean, why calling people black probably wasn't such a good idea in the first place, or taking that on as like the black and white and stark colors, because we've for millennia used those colors to indicate certain emotions, certain states. I remember one time someone said I did something and they were like, "How very white of you," and I didn't understand what that meant. I thought they meant like, "Oh, how pertaining to the race of white that was." What you did. You did something very typically white. But it just meant like a white knight, like a good deed. But it's so easily confused these days because we've messed with the language too much, and we've ruined good linguistic things we used to have access to. Now you say that, how very white of you, and then people are going to look at you sideways and think there's something up. So you don't have benefit of being able to use that. Or we used to, or there's the saying, a blackguard, right? In fact, I used to think it was a blackguard. That blackguard. A blackguard. I don't know what a blackguard is, but it stands for, I always heard that, they'd have some stuffy English kind of guy. You blackguard. But it was blackguard. They always somehow like to pronounce it really with a lot of G's in there, it sounded to me. Well, I guess guard, blackguard, And so when faces gather blackness, it's like a reflection of what they see. You know what I mean? When you experience things, I don't know, it's funny because I've read books, novels in my time, histories, right? And when it says someone and they had a very black expression on their face, I always understood exactly what it meant. They talk about black deeds, black days, dark days. It's the idea of bad things have come upon the world or the time or the place or the person, and their face begins to reflect all the evil that's come upon them, all the, the bad things that have descended on them. And as that does, if we say someone's face brightens, some people have a very sunny expression. I tell that to my wife all the time. She has a bright and sunny expression. Her face is that way. And some people are more that way naturally, right? They have a natural sunniness to them in their face and their disposition. But there's also, you can take the same face and tell them a lot of bad news and things, and their expression will change. No matter how naturally they may be sunny or inclined to a good attitude. Their face becomes like dark storm clouds gathering, But, that's merely a metaphor for what's going on. But you see their faith began to arrange itself in a way that is a reflection of the darkness that they're feeling within. And it's just funny because as I spent a few minutes there explaining that, I think wow, it's funny because I'm sure we all intuitively kind of understand without it ever having been explained to us what it means. But on some level as a teacher, I feel like I have to be able to explain it because otherwise, what good is teaching? If we all just instinctively know these things, then what's the point? So their faces are looking around them, seeing the fall of the city, the burning of their homes, the taking away of their treasures. And it's not, a black look is not so much, black is the color of mourning. Dark days are one thing, black days are others. It's a day of loss, mourning. Not even mourning, it's actually, I think of a black look as more of the shock of the evil that's come upon you. It's like the shock. Not sadness, for some reason we associate sadness with blue, but you could have a black, like a mourning black expression, but it is a little more sober, a little more, like empty. I think of it as being sort of like not an expression of sadness or emotion, but of just devastation, of the tearing out of everything that one feels, or having all one's feelings torn loose in a moment. And it's that time where they haven't been replaced with new feelings. It's just you are almost numb. You are not able to process things immediately sometimes when really bad things happen. So it's the shock of their destruction that's come upon them. Where is the dwelling of the lions, and the feeding place of the young lions, where the lion, even the old lion, walked, and the lion's whelp, and none made them afraid? Where is it? Where's the lion's den? The lion did tear in pieces enough for his whelps, and strangled for his lionesses, and filled his holes with prey, and his dens with ravin. Let's read the concluding verse for that. Behold, I am against thee, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will burn her chariots in the smoke, and the sword shall devour thy young lions, and I will cut off thy prey from the earth, and the voice of thy messengers shall be no more heard. Is that chapter? That is chapter. Where is the dwelling of the lions? This again, Nineveh is a pool. Nineveh is a den of lions. It's got all these fierce beasts inhabiting it. Oh, Nineveh, fierce. I think their symbol was a lion, or is that Babylon? I had those. I can think of all the carvings I've seen in history books of like half man, half beast type stuff, and I think there was a lion motif in Nineveh. I mean, what country doesn't like to appropriate the lion for themselves? Right? People like the lion. I guess, is there a nation that has appropriated the bunny rabbit as their symbol? We are the rabbits. We multiply and we run. So, but the idea of whether it was a national symbol or not is of little importance. They are here symbolized as a lion's den, filled with strong, competent. Well, I was gonna say, I was getting confused because I'm like strong carnivorous animals, but that's obviously what a lion is. But it's filled with a mighty military, a strong power, a king who is decisive, and that's why it refers to the old lion, like the old king, good old Sennacherib, good old Tiglath-Pileser. These are just a couple of Assyrians that I remember. Tiglath-Pileser, and not Nebuchadnezzar, he's Babylonian. Tiglath-Pileser and Sennacherib. They're old Assyrian kings. What about them? Where did the old lion go? There he walked there. The old one that everyone was afraid of, right? And probably, I believe the old lion may be Tiglath-Pileser and the young lion Sennacherib. I'm just throwing that out there because I didn't, like I said, I didn't do a lot of background on Assyria for this because I don't generally do that. If I had time, I would. If this was a full-time job or something, I would be expected to. But because this is purely what it is, I don't. Right? But it's going to refer to some, he's probably alluding to some father and son. I mentioned those two because I know those are of, if I know their names, they must be famous, right? Just like Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. He has to be important because we know his name, right? And if I can mention Tiglath-Pileser and Sennacherib, they must be important because they're the ones I remember. And I think Tiglath-Pileser was the father of Sennacherib, or grandfather maybe, whatever. All right, don't quote me on that. He's a false teacher. He said, That's exactly, when teachers make mistakes, it ought to be along those lines. Unless you're billing yourself as a history teacher, then you better know what you're talking about. Right? I just mean as far as I'm teaching Christianity, not world history. But anyways, so this prophecy is referring to some father, son, or grandfather, grandson duo, in some degree, referring back to the old kings that were so strong and powerful and fearsome, and everyone was afraid, right? Everyone was afraid of the Assyrians. Everyone quaked in their boots at the Assyrians. But now the Assyrians, as the tables are turned, are found to be quaking in their own boots in fear of what's coming upon them as their city is sacked and they're running away from the battle. And for the first time really tasting defeat. And having been such cruel conquerors, you can only imagine what they think is in store for them. Nothing very pleasant, doubtless. If you go around cruelly, making lots of enemies, you shouldn't be surprised when it comes around again and they go after you in the same way. You shouldn't be surprised. People are often surprised when they're suddenly confronted with cruelty and malevolence in life. Like suddenly someone's just cruel or mean to you for no reason at all. Or just rude. Like unexpected. Like if you're rude, you can kind of expect people to be rude back. Every once in a while, though, you get someone who's just rude to you out of the blue, and it's sort of, it can get you off your footing a bit because it's like you don't expect that. I go around very politely, hello, yes, excuse me, and try to be polite to people, and all of a sudden someone really rude, hey, I'm like, whoa, I didn't expect that, and off they go on their merry way, and they probably encounter rude people all the time. Same thing with the cruel. The cruel find cruelty. Those who exercise it will find it. It's no guarantee that by being kind, you're never going to have anyone be cruel to you. But I can guarantee if you are cruel, you will find cruelty being exercised on you in no time whatsoever. Or eventually, but I do think that you will find it actually quite frequently. Where the dwelling place, what he's saying is like, this is Nineveh? Wait a second, Nineveh? I see guys with their faces gathering blackness, and their knees are smiting together, and their hearts are melted, and they're turning away and running from the battle. Nineveh, Nineveh is the place where the lion dwelt, where he fed his young lions. The old lion, he walked there, and no one made him afraid. This is Nineveh? No, where's Nineveh? Where's the place where the lion dwelt? Where's the place where no one made them afraid? All I see is fear on every side. That's what it's saying. That's what this is about. Where is that place? I heard Nineveh was a place of lions and fearsome warriors, and not cowards cowering in their hovels. Not that they're cowardly, instinct kicks in, when once it's hard. Here's the thing. It's easy when you are prepared. If men are prepared, tomorrow we're going to hang you. You kind of compose yourselves, you get ready, and okay, they're going to hang me. Maybe freak out at first, but by the time you get to the scaffolding, you may have processed the information. Certainly in our society, because it takes so long to execute people. And not that I'm for it, because like I said, it's like we've had too many cases where people had been freed from death row for me to trust. I don't like, without overwhelming evidence of guilt, it shouldn't be something you do to people. I remember when I was young, I was in favor of the death penalty, because I definitely think it's right that people who do really bad things, it's right that they be killed. It's right that they be put to death. That's the right thing. I certainly believe that. So says the law of God. But if the system to determine whether or not they did anything is not, I'd rather put those people away and throw away the key than kill someone who didn't deserve it. Because I'd rather be alive in a cell than dead in a grave. So it's a small consolation to someone who's innocent. But if you're alive in the cell, at least there's a chance at some point that they could be like, oh, look, we discovered DNA, and they can let the guy out. A number of people were executed for crimes they did not commit. To me, that's completely unacceptable, and you can't have that. And so it should be a very high standard before you start applying death to people, you know. So I'm not a big fan of that because I just don't think that it's way too, you know, the criteria should be much more. They should be really careful about that. And I begin to question whether we're capable of being that good. Because a lot of times the people who are most intimately involved with things are not actually, it's being tried by people who are nowhere, had nothing to do with the situation, don't know anything about it. It's like being tried by a machine with living parts. I don't know. Anyways, the lion of old walked in his whelp, and he fed his contemporaries, his young lions, his generals. He went and he took, he says, the lion did tear in pieces enough for his whelps, and strangled for his lionesses, and filled his holes with prey and his dens with ravin. It's talking about all the things they're bringing out of the city, the spoil, the furniture, the appointments, the different beautiful things, ornate carvings of wood and gold and silver and stone and whatever. He went out and he conquered places, took their wealth, brought it back for his women and for his men, for his the men upon whom he shed his favor, and for the young to bring up his meal. They fed themselves on the spoil of others, just like a predator. They were a predatory nation. Filled his holes with prey. Animals like to stuff. They kill things and then they stuff Oftentimes they save save some of it for later. I don't know which kind of lions do that or whatever. They bring stuff back to devour, ravin. They think of ravenous, right? What is it's obviously I've never seen ravenous used as a noun except here in the King James. I mean, I remember this passage. Ravenous means to be, like I'm ravenous with hunger. But ravin, that's unusual. It probably means something like prey. I mean, the Hebrew word, I don't know if it translates exactly to ravin in English. I'm just commenting on that ravin word in English here. I was going to remember when I do this to make you guys come along. Because it's less boring that way, isn't it? And it's still, the little pop-up window is now gone. It was there for a week or two, and now it's gone. The lion, even though the lion was afraid. Okay, I'm like totally lost. Okay, ravin. Trefa. It means torn animal or torn flesh. So ravenous means I crave, or I'm in a torn fleshy mood. I guess is what that means. I need some torn flesh. Whereas prey is prey, food, also a leaf. Interesting. Teref, trefa. Tref and trefa, they sound like similar words. It's sort of like with animal and animal pieces. It's kind of what it sounds like to me. Okay. Text. Thank you. Okay. The lion did tear in pieces enough. He had enough. He had plenty. where is this wonderful, it's basically mocking them and then recounting their brutality. And then the concluding verses, I am against thee, saith the Lord, I will burn her chariots in the smoke, and the sword shall devour thy young lions. Young lions, men of war, are often symbolized by young lions. And I will cut off thy prey from the earth, or just your young men, period, men of war age. In the olden days, the tendency in war was to just kill all the males of a certain age, in the battle. The Assyrians were particularly cruel, killing off others too, just for sport, I will cut off thy prey from the earth, meaning you will no longer take prey. You will no longer have a source of prey for you. The voice of thy messengers shall no more be heard. What does that mean? Well, the Assyrians sent a lot of messengers out. Particularly, you can think about in the book of Isaiah, chapter 36. It's also in Kings. I don't know the chapter. Where they send the messenger Rabshakeh to deliver a message from the king of Assyria to the men on the wall of Jerusalem, informing them that if they do not surrender to the king of king of Assyria, they will soon be feasting on their own dung and drinking their own urine. And that was his message, among other things. Send me out some men. Basically he said, come out to me, and there was an offer made. Send us some men. If you can send us some men, I'll give you horses for them, and they will come with us. He wanted some sort of tribute. So the voice of their messengers, meaning you no longer have the voice of command. You're not going to be sending messengers around telling people what to do, ordering about vassal states. The kingdom is taken from you. So also, Satan has his messengers. The enemy in the end times has his messengers. Also, the beast and the false prophet, right? The false prophet stands to deliver the message of the beast to the world. Bow down and worship me. There is a lot of sending to and fro of messengers. Like you think about the unclean spirits that come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and of the false prophet. The three unclean spirits, like frogs, and I'm trying to remember. I know it's chapter 16. Is it the sixth? I think it's the sixth. The sixth seal, or the sixth vial of wrath. When it's poured out, the three unclean spirits come forth, and they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth to the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them together to that great day of God Almighty. The messengers go forth to draw out the armies of the world to do battle with God. Now, whether that is what the exact message is, I'm not sure, but that is what's actually happening. They're actually being brought forth to do battle with the Lord Jesus when he returns. I don't know if that's exactly what the story they're going to hear is going to be. Maybe it's going to be like, we're going to go fight Satan. And like I said, if you are aligned with Satan, God is Satan. Because Satan means enemy. And God is the enemy of the wicked. And the enemy of Satan. So it's, we've applied a title, a descriptive title to a being that is to the dragon, is essentially who's. You say, what's his name? Is it Lucifer, the devil? Well, the devil is more often the accuser. Is again, because that's what devil means. It means an accuser. That also is sort of a title, because it's not really a proper name. Even Lucifer is, just a Latin translation of, which means light bringer, and not a particularly, some people say that's his original name. It's like, again, that was when they called him Bright Star, Son of the Dawn. I don't think they meant that's his name. Though that might be his name, I don't know. The serpent. The serpent's a good name. Again, a descriptive one, though. Because he is the serpent, and God is no serpent, you know. Like, unlike enemy, it's not something that can be, you know, God can accuse, God can be an enemy, but he's not the enemy of his own people. He is not the accuser of his own people. Satan is the accuser of God's people. Satan is the enemy of God's people. But he is the serpent through and through. I mean, that is a little better of a description of him, as far as, you know, if I wanted to lay a label on him. He is the serpent. That old devil called that old serpent called the devil and Satan. That's what he's called. And he has his young lions too, right? His young lions. Their teeth were as the teeth of lions. They had breastplates, as it were, breastplates of iron, the fifth trumpet. They go forth in their army, right? Their army goes forth to, as it says, to, and they cover the whole world, to, not slay the third part, but they're the locust army in chapter 5, or chapter 9, sorry, the fifth trumpet. It says they have teeth, their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And they're amidst all these other symbols. They have hair as the hair of women. They have faces as the faces of men, because their appearance is the appearance of men. But symbolically, they have the hair of women because of they are beautiful and attractive, and et cetera, et cetera. But the teeth of lions also refers to the cruelty and viciousness with which they fight. And that harkens back to the Assyrians, who are here likened to lions taking the prey, because they also will be vicious. But they also, in a similar fashion, in the end, when they're defeated, their end comes suddenly. And there's no, you know, it's just basically the dragon, no, not the war in heaven part, but the part where the Lord comes, and out of his mouth, let's see. And the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceedeth out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. What's the verse before that I want? Chapter 19. I'm thinking 20. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet, which wrought miracles before them, which had received the mark of the beast, and them that had worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into the lake of fire. They're basically just grabbed and taken and thrown away into the lake of fire. And so, yeah, his young lions also are summarily destroyed. You know, what is a prospering kingdom one moment, the next moment is no more. And they're no longer, you know, I think of Mystery Babylon, you know, all the world is sort of going to be operating under the yoke of the, I just want to relate this to the future prophecy, because it's something to be aware of. The whole world is going to be operating under his yoke, under his control, you know. But then, so it's going to be a very, the word I like, a ubiquitous thing. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be all over the place. It's like just going to be, you know, I always say you'll know when the end times are here because you won't need to turn on the TV. I sincerely believe that. You won't need to turn on the TV. You'll know what's happening. Though, don't, you know, that's my opinion. But I think it's sufficient that everyone's going to know whether you got internet or not. You know, it's the end times. It's not something you're going to have to dig out of a corner. Look I found this guy way deep on the internet in the dark web. I found this guy who's preaching and he says it's the end times. And he's got all these charts and maps. And there's someone, I recently just told them, stop sending me these messages. They're sending me like 10 megabyte emails stuffed with charts and highlighted text. And I know this person because I told him a couple of years ago, they were a false prophet. And they still send me stuff. I'm like, stop sending me these things. I don't want them. I reject them. And they found that my denunciation was so strong, they actually emailed me back, because they don't usually do that, because I'd be like, unsubscribe, no response. Then it's like, oh, by all means, like, very offended. Or like, if you don't want it, well, you don't get it. Thank you. I don't want your nonsense. All right. Well, I don't know. I guess the voice of the messengers are silenced, and the Lord has his vengeance on Nineveh. The Lord will also have his vengeance on the serpent in the end of all things. Let's continue with chapter 3. We have another 15 minutes. So, woe to the bloody city! It is all full of lies and robbery. Oh, I didn't mention the last part. The Lord of hosts, just because I'm doing a Bible study. Well, the Lord of hosts means the Lord of armies, the Lord Zebaoth. And my Hebrew pronunciation is, you can count on it to be worse than my pronunciation of Greek, but it's Zeboath or Zeboath. I'm never exactly sure how to pronounce it. But hosts means armies. When I was a kid, I didn't understand what that meant, and I never know exactly what people know. The Lord of armies. He is Lord over armies, and he is sending an army against Assyria. It happens to be the Babylonians, who also become the enemies. But for now, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So the Babylonians are doing God's work in punishing the Assyrians, just as the Assyrians were doing God's work in punishing Israel. The bloody city is all full of lies and robbery. The prey departeth not. The noise of a whip, the noise of the rattling of the wheels, and of the prancing horses, and of the jumping chariots. The horseman lifteth up both the bright sword and the glittering spear, and there is a multitude of slain, and a great number of carcasses. There is none end of their corpses. They stumble upon their corpses. Let's read the last verse here. Because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favored harlot, the mistress of witchcrafts, that selleth nations through her whoredoms, and families through her witchcrafts. So woe to the bloody city, Nineveh. She is the bloody city. It is all full of lies and robbery. Remember, in the Bible, there's a prophet Jonah, and everyone thinks of Jonah as, Jonah and the whale, and Jonah and the whale, and Jonah and the whale. Or Jonah and the great fish. If you know anything about the Bible, you're like Jonah and the great fish, Jonah and the great fish, Jonah and the great fish. Though a whale could be a great fish, because I don't know that people knew that whales weren't fish, so it doesn't matter. I remember people saying like, well, it's not a whale, it's a fish. It's like, maybe to Jonah it was a great fish. Because I know they called them whale fishes, back in the day. Some people did anyways. It's like, well, doesn't God know? It's like, God isn't he's not going to adjust our language to fit future categorization of animals based on the way they feed their young. And based on their blood warmth and all that. It's like silly. It's like the people of his day, if they said no, it was a mammal of the class Cetus and blah blah blah, the people would have been scratching their heads. But anyways, you think of Jonah and the whale, or Jonah and the fish, whatever you prefer. But of course, the real thing about Jonah is, he was sent to prophesy to Nineveh way back when. But really long before this. I don't know exactly how long, maybe 100 years. Some time, at least a generation or two before their real rise. He went to prophesy to Nineveh when they were still rising power. because of all the evil that was done in their city. And he went to prophesy of their destruction if they didn't repent, to warn them of the judgment of God. And Jonah, the reason he was on the ship and got swallowed by the whales, because he did not want to deliver that message. He did not want to tell the Ninevites to repent. He wanted God to punish them because, it doesn't say exactly. He just didn't want to he did not want to prophesy to these heathen. He wanted to see them destroyed. I've heard people say that it was because he did not want them. He wanted Israel to be spared. Blah, 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 blah. I don't know what Jonah's inner workings of his mind are. But it was, he did not want to go to prophesy to the Ninevites, so he avoided it by getting in a ship. And then the great storm came, and the men of the ship threw Jonah off because Jonah was the cause of the storm, because God was not pleased with Jonah. And the fish swallowed him up and vomited him up. And he was brought to Nineveh covered in fish vomit, I suppose. And he may have been seen being vomited. I don't know where he got vomited up exactly, that it was accessible to the Ninevites or whatever. I mean, Assyria was an expanding empire. Whatever, he went there and prophesied and warned them. And the city repented. But this was short-lived. This is not, as often repentance does. I mean, my repentance, does it carry on to my kids? Maybe my kids' kids? Are they going to share my view of the world? Are they going to share the life changes that came on me, the things I value? Can I even impart my I consider it, how can my kids be passionate like I am for the things I'm passionate about when they haven't lived the life I lived? They didn't go through what I went through. They didn't commit my mistakes. I'm not even letting them commit my mistakes, because I don't want to repeat my parents' mistakes. You know what I mean? So I'm making my own mistakes without even knowing what mistakes I'm making. I mean, here's the thing. I'd rather that. I try to replicate in raising my kids the things that my parents, I think they did right. The things that they did that had a good effect. The good things they did. Not the things they did that were mistakes that worked evil in me, but that eventually God worked to good, because all things work together for those that love God. You know what I mean? I didn't want to repeat the errors they made, like, when I was very young, telling me women were evil and I should never have anything to do with them. I think that was a mistake. You should say, someday you're going to want to get married, and you're probably going to find girls attractive because they're pretty, aren't they? But that's for later, young man, and, blah, blah, blah. Or whatever. I don't know. Is that the right thing? That's what I told my kids. Something like that. You get married, but no need to worry about that now. You're still young. When they're about 12, I give them that talk. Tell them what sex is, how it works, and definitely how it works. I don't want anyone else to tell them how it works. I don't want them to be like feeling like they're getting secret information that I withheld from them about their own biology. Geez, that's the easy part. That's the easy part. It's fun to watch their faces, though, right? But, if you take it on, you take it on. You got to take it on. As a parent, you got to, be the adult. Come on. You can talk to your kids. People are afraid of their children. It's pitiful. My parents wanted to say, girls are bad, evil, stay away, and they kind of laughed about it. But it's really not a good thing to tell kids, young men, because they're going to find nature's going to take its course. And you've already alienated them. They're like, well, I can't talk to my parents about girls because they say that's evil, even though my dad's married. So I didn't repeat that mistake, and many others. I try to repeat the things that they did right. But it's impossible to pass down the full experience. Like my inner life, I cannot convey to them somehow, because it's wrought in the pain of the mistakes I made that I'm responsible for. Besides whatever my parents did, it's not so much I don't blame them for what happened to me subsequently. I just know that was a mistake. That was something they could have told me, other things that might have made a difference in certain things. Certainly, I wouldn't have had them to blame. You know what I mean? If I went astray anyways, I couldn't say like, well, maybe they shouldn't have told me that. But now I have that and it's there. So I'm sure we all go, I count on this that my children will go astray in some capacity or the other. I'm not going to be perfect people, But they're a lot better than I was, which is good and heartening. But here's the thing. I may make great kids, but are they going to know how to make great kids themselves? Are they going to have all these mistakes that I made to look back on, to adjust? Or are they going to take it all for granted and just kind of raise their kids without much thought? Which is a lot of people do. And I also attribute a lot of the success I've had to not sending them to school. Because in school, your children are raised by their worst friends. You know what I mean? Their worst people who influence them are the ones who are actually... You can just basically say, my children is being raised by the most degenerate person they know at school. And that's not a good standard. You know what I mean? As far as... I'm not saying like I say they know the most degenerate person they hang out with, the most degenerate friend they have, the most foolish person they admire is having a greater influence on their life than you. It's not necessarily that the most degenerate person at the school is their friend, but if they are friends with someone, with people, the most degenerate person is pulling them downwards. And try to get in between that. See what you reap. So, it's a problem. And like I said, it's funny, in the past couple hundred years, we just decided, let's just put our kids in schools. All the kids that are the same age, I was going to take this cup full of pens and all the kids that are the same age, we're going to put them together in one fist, and the others, we'll separate them into different groups by age and intelligence, whatever is convenient for the teacher, and then we will, that's how we're going to deal with their education. What could go wrong with that? What could go wrong with that? And why has no one ever questioned it since? It's like we just decided to do it, and then it's like, what a great idea. Well, they get an education. It works. Okay. And I think when it says here, the woe of the bloody city is all full of lies and robbery, it's saying the city, the thing, they may have been repented some in the past, but now they're a city full of lies, robbery. They are an unworthy instrument. The time of their punishment is drawn nigh. They've stolen all their wealth. They've lied. How many lies do they tell to get into cities to just sack it? If you will open to us, we will treat you kindly. They open up and it's like, kidding. Gotcha. Fooled you. I love that ruse, where we tell them we're going to deal kindly with them, and then we flay their children alive and before their eyes. It's the look on their faces. That was hilarious, wasn't it? So, the prey departeth not. I don't know what he means by that. Does it mean, because it says before the prey is taken away. And here it says the prey departs not. There's a lot of reversal where they'll say the exact, the thing is the Bible, I understand, the Bible intentionally contradicts itself all the time. Because it's meant, and this isn't a true contradiction, it's just a contrast. The contradiction of saying the prey does not depart, and here the prey does depart, or the prey does depart, and then saying it's not. The prey, what did it say? I will cut off the prey, right? The prey departeth not. What does that mean? Well, my thoughts immediately run to the idea that now that they are a prey, you know what I mean? the prey they took is taken from them, and now they are become the prey, and the prey does not escape. You know what I mean? They are the victim. The bloody city, full of lies and robbery, now is the victim. Or it means maybe it means in a sense of looking back, they never ceased from taking prey. They never let their victims go. I wonder if another translation would be at all helpful. I'm out of time. How's that? Too bad. That's probably all right because I think there was... let me see. I wonder how long chapter 3 is. This is not going to be a long book, obviously. It's only 3 short chapters. The prey departeth not. I'm sorry, I didn't bring you there. To depart, remove. And I'm just curious. I was going to look at another translation now. I better bring you along. We'll finish up like this. Never without victims. Oh, yeah. That's an interesting take on it. From the good old NIV. Full of plunder, never without victims. Oh, I see. What they're saying is like, before it was literally true. You know? I like this translation because it's sort of saying, like I said, it's like, where is the lion's den? And here it's like, the bloody woe to the city of blood, full of lies, full of plunder, never without victims. But, and again, that's a contradiction of what it said before. In the just previous verse. I will burn up your chariots in the smoke, and the sword shall devour your young lions. I will leave you no prey. There will be no prey. I didn't really talk enough about that last verse, did I? Where am I? I am against you. Behold, I am against you, saith the Lord. What a dark thing for God to say. There are many verses where it says, because this, that, the other, behold, I am against you. I'm thinking of Jeremiah 23. Behold, I am against you, saith the Lord, for all your misdeeds. I think they call it Lord Almighty. It's the Lord of hosts, unless it's unless that's wrong. Because there is a Lord Almighty. I guess Lord of Hosts could be considered Almighty. Whatever. Anyways, so I do like that exclamatory idea. I'm in chapter 3 there. Okay. So we're going to have to begin at the top. We're going to have to begin where we started off in chapter 3 here on Monday, and that's fine. I'm against it. I will burn her chariots in the smoke. Oh, I just draw your attention to a few things in closing. The burning of the chariots and the smoke makes me think of the smoke of their torment ascended up forever and ever. When it talks about the destruction of Babylon. Actually, that's those that worship the beast and the image, but there's this smoke, and the burning is often associated with the end of God's enemies, right? The sword devouring, the sword out of his mouth there goes a sharp sword, with it he should smite the nations. The Lord Christ, his tongue is a sharp sword, because the word of God is like a sharp sword, dividing in sunder even the soul and the spirit. Cut off thy prey. Okay, so I did address everything, I believe. So we'll continue with having laid the groundwork in chapter 3. We did verse 1. So we'll start with verse 2 on Monday. Until then, thanks for joining me. I will be looking at the screen on Monday. Thank you.
Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke